Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending today. We'll get started in about a minute here. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, you can put your name and the name of your organization. We still have people entering the webinar, so I'm going to just hold off until I feel like we've got as many as we can get before we start. Um, and Rudy is going to be leading today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I will just begin with some announcements. Welcome and thank you for attending today's technical assistance webinar. The webinar is presented by Amity Foundation, acting as the third-party administrator for LA County's Justice, Care, and Opportunities Department and the CFCI Care grants. The CFCI or Care First Community Investment Grants are the result of ballot measure J, voted in by LA County residents in 2020. Care First community investment funds are intended to be invested directly into communities and alternatives to incarceration that address negative outcomes caused by racially driven criminal legal system inequities and long-term economic disinvestment. Today's webinar is being recorded. You do not have to be on camera. Please understand that if you are on camera, your image may be captured in the recording. Staying on the webinar represents your consent to being recording. My name is Rebecca Gray. I'm the grant administrator for Amity Third Party Administrator, and I'm going to hand things over to Rudy. Let me just make sure I've let in. Yeah, it looks like we don't have any other pending participants, so a few more may come in, but I'm going to hand it over to Rudy now. Rudy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, give me just one second. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen first. And Rebecca, can you confirm you can see my screen?
I confirm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, today we're going to do an Apricot training. The training today will be to show you how to use and how to pull data from what we call our provider report. Now, this report allows you to view all of the data that you actually enter into Apricot in regard to your student profiles, right? So when you create a student's profile, you share the demographic information, you create their enrollment form, their services, and any outcomes. We have a report that allows you to view all of the information, which can be done either by a specific timeline or by the entire length of the grant. The report will also show you how to view any missing data that you have within the system, as well as how to view any and all of the data validation forms that have been submitted up until this point. So, starting from our homepage, I will apologize now because my screen is much different than what you see, in part because I have access to basically every part of Apricot. Within your homepage, you will see a section that says TPA Grantee Reports. Now, within this section, you have two buttons. If you click on the Provider Monthly Data Report, it will open up the report that we need to view. Now, really the way that we start off with this report, the very first thing we want to do is ensure that we have an actual start date and an end date. Now, I am going to remove the end date that I had listed on there. Now, as you can see, Apricot still shows you the type of information it's looking for, right? So it's providing today's date. However, that information is blank. Now, running the report with a start date and having a blank end date in here, you will see that there is no data. So this is a very common occurrence that happens with all of our, amongst not just our grantees, but even staff, right? If you forget to enter a date here, it does mess with the permission of the report and does skew the data that you're able to view. So please ensure to actually type in a end date. Now that we have our start and end date set, and we'll give the report a minute to refresh and load. I can start going through these sections and begin the review of my data. So the very first section we'll start with is the student profiles. So if I click here where I see you, excuse me, next to TPA contracts, you have the little drop down arrow. If you click that, it will then display all of the student information that you have. So we are using our test site. So we have a bunch of fake profiles that we've created to be able to test the system. Within this section, you are able to view all of the demographics that were set up for the student, from their first name, last name, date of birth, to the age, gender, their address, and all the information. If at any point I wanted to review, so if let's say I was taking a look at Rudy Fake and I take a look at his address and I'm like, I need to update that information, I can click directly within that item and it will take me directly into the student's profile where I can edit and update any information. Now, you are able to do this across any of the profiles, and I will make sure to show you as we're going along. So coming back to the report, I'm also able to view any and all enrollment data for our students. So typically, we should only see one enrollment form per student. Now, we did, again, because this is for test items, we do have a lot of duplicate entries. And you can tell it's a duplicate by not just the review of the first and last name, but also this record ID. So typically, what we would consider a duplicate is if you have two enrollment forms that are both active. So if I take a look at Carol Fake, I see that the record ID is the same for both. She has two separate start dates, and then they are both active. Now, the reason I say that that would be a fake, typically you only need one enrollment form per student, and this is for your organization as a whole. So we do understand that sometimes you have multiple programs throughout your agency, and a student can go from being part of the employment service program to the housing program, and so you're trying to identify when they began receiving services across. We simply want to know as a whole, as organization, as Amity organization, when did the student become one of your students? When did they begin receiving services? The very next section is the service data. And so again, if I hover over TPA contracts and I click on it, I can see all the service data that we have entered for our students. Just a note that you are also able to sort your data by any of the labels up at the top by simply clicking on it. And also, as mentioned before, if I wanted to take a look at, let's say, this entry for basic necessities, it states it's 30 minutes. It should have been, let's say, an hour. I can go ahead and just click on the entry itself, and my entry opened up. And so I can make any adjustments I need. So if, let's say, I need to make it an hour. Also, there's no service subcategory, so I can go ahead and update that as well. I'll say it was a gift card, and I can click save. Now I have updated that entry. When I come here, if I want to refresh my report, and so I can take a look. Sorry, who was that? Ava Fake. So I will see here now that my entry's been updated. It now has a gift card petty cash as a service subcategory, and it's been updated to 60 minutes. So these do take effect immediately, and you are able to refresh to see the updates noted in the system. The next section is your outcomes data. So any outcomes that have been entered for your student are available to view here. So all of the sections are very similar in the aspect of you being able to access the data. So again, if I click on increase in assessment score, I'm able to jump directly into that student's form. Okay, so this next piece is the missing enrollment form. So as I can see, I have 8 different students that are missing an enrollment form for my program. Uh, Basically, every student should have an enrollment form from the beginning that you create that profile. If you do see any students here, we would want to have you updated to ensure that they have a form. What that means is you would go into the student's profile, you'll click View Folder, and here at the very top, the TPA program enrollment form. This is where you would identify when the student began receiving services with you. I'll say he was a walk-in, the student status is active. I'll do test notes, and I will save record. Okay, so going back to the report, if I refresh the data, I initially had 8 students. Valentin is no longer on the list. So this report does run in real time. As soon as you update any of the information and you click to refresh, the information gets automatically updated right on the spot. Missing data address. So this one actually should no longer be a possibility. However, sometimes folks are very fast in the way that they enter their data that they're able to make that happen from time to time. Initially, address was not a required field. So we had a lot of folks just omitting that information. It is now a required field and should not be possible for you to skip. However, if somehow that does happen, it manages to happen, we do want to ensure that all of our students have an address. The missing data services. So all students in the system should have at minimum an enrollment form and should have received a service. If it was the ordeal that a student signed up for programming and never came back, we know that does happen. You can always reach out to the help desk and let us know the student's information, their record ID, first, last name, and date of birth, any of those pieces of information, and we can move forward with removing the profile from your system. That will also ensure that the student doesn't populate within this section. Student data entry form. So this section is only relevant to some specific orgs. Um, if you are entering data and you've been directed by a data team to enter data through this form, you will see all entries visible here. I won't spend too much time on this one as it's really only roughly a little over a handful of orgs that should be using this format. And the very last section, the data validation submissions. So every month, I believe it's by the 5th, you are required to submit a data validation form. The data validation form serves as your how do I say that? Basically, you're identifying that you have entered any and all data for said month. So if we take a look at this form, within it, I'm stating the date, what month I'm validating. So for August 2023, I have entered any and all relevant data into the system. If you do not provide services, you would have an additional item to enter. You'd be given an explanation as to why there were no services provided. Mine said yes. So what that means is, as a grant advocate or as any of the Amity team, we would be able to view the data for your organization for said month, and we should be able to view any and all services, enrollment forms, and outcomes that were set up by your organization for the students. Okay. Are there any questions currently just in regard to the form? I still have, we are still going to go over how to export your data. But up until this point, just in regards to viewing the data itself, are there any questions?
If you have a question, you can unmute yourself. If you don't want to unmute yourself, you can type your question in the chat and I will read it aloud. Does
Thank you,
anyone,
Rebecca.
sure, does anyone have any questions?
I guess I have a question. Just in terms of getting to the report, just it's just on the left side, right, um of the dashboard there on the dashboard. Is there any other way of getting to the reports, or this is the only
Mhm.
area of the reports?
So there is a TPA grantee report section on your homepage,
Hmm.
and it's the provider monthly data report.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rudy? All right, I don't see any raised hands or
Okay.
there are no comments in the chat.
Okay, awesome. All right. So the very next piece we're going to go over is exporting the data. So I do know that a lot of times you want to be able to review your data. You want to possibly pull all the services that you've provided to, create a report, or you're trying to, make it a little easier view. So within the report itself, over on this right-hand side, you have the report actions. So if you click export, you'll get this pop-up window. So I'm able to pull the report in two separate methods. One, I can do all sections, and it will give me an Excel sheet with multiple tabs that basically show each section of data. So I will show you what that looks like. Sorry, it'll take a minute because it needs to download and export as an Excel file. Okay. And so now what I have available is this report, and each tab here at the bottom identifies what information I'm looking at. So I have my student profile rows. So this allows me to see all the demographic information for all of my students, first, last, date of birth. If I keep going through the data, I am now able to see the enrollment forms. So again, all of the students with their record ID, the dates that they were enrolled, their current status. If they were exited, I'll see the exit date and their reason for exit. And then I'm also able to see any and all services that have been entered. And so within this section, again, you're able to see the program that your service data was assigned to. So this is important for our dually funded orgs. So for instance, if it said Amity Foundation, it would say Program Area 1, Amity Foundation, or it would say Program Area 9, PA09, Amity Foundation, to help you differentiate between the two different programs. I'm able to see the student's name and their record ID in parentheses, the date of the service name and subcategory, time spent, and then for the specific workshops that have the series start and end date, it would be available as well. Right. So then we have all the different items that we mentioned that were basically reviewed within that provider report are now available to view within the Excel file. Now, if I only wanted to view a specific section of a report, sorry, and let me do that again. So over here on the right-hand side, I'm gonna click export again. And within this top section that says report, I will click one section, and now I can identify the specific um, section of the report that I want to export. So I'm going to say service data. I'll click export. And then again, I'll wait for the item to download. And as soon as it's available, I'll then be able to pull a quick Excel file that has all the information available. All right. And so, yeah, so now I'm able to see all the service data that I've entered into the system. Again, the data is going to align to the timeline I have set since I believe it was 3/1 of 23. So I'm going along with our program area 1 through 7 grantees and their initial start timeline up until today's date. If I was, let's say, program or one of our year 3 grantees, right? Program areas 22 to 46. This timeline would differ. I would start 9/1 of 24, as that's when the contract began. So from this point, I would then just see the relevant information of students. So all the enrollments that occurred in between the timeline I listed. Same thing with services. It would now only list items that occurred within the timeline I have referenced. Are there any questions?
So again, please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for Rudy. If you don't want your voice to be recorded, you can type your question in the chat and I will read it. Anyone have any questions on this segment for Rudy? All right, Rudy, I don't see
Okay.
any hands raised and there are no
So,
questions in the chat.
so the very last item that we're going to review. So we have a TPA training resources section. Oop. And so I kind of want to make sure that folks are always aware that this section exists. So we do have access to the Apricot manual, so you can download it directly from Apricot. We also have a video similar to today's training. It covers all of the same information. You are able to click to play directly from Apricot. There's also an Apricot training video. So if you have someone who, let's say, a new user that you're going to have begin helping entering data, this covers all of basically the data entry, right? How to create a student profile, how to enter enrollment, how to enter services, and how to enter outcomes. And then we have our 2 other items. So creating batch records within Apricot, and then the TPA ROI sample. The ROI standing for release of information. So again, this is just a sample that we have available for you to use. You can always feel free to download it and then make any adjustments as you need them. I believe there's a question on the chat about if the recording will be shared for today's session.
Thank you, Rudy. Yes, there are. There will be this recording will be shared.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, that is all for today, folks. If there are no questions, thank you so much for your time. I know it went really, really quickly. It tends to happen that way when there's no questions.
Where
But
can we
please,
find
if you
it?
do have questions, we can stay on and please
And
feel free to ask them.
I want to encourage everyone, right? Like Rudy is here. Rudy is here for you right now. Like, if you've got questions, please feel free to engage with him. We have
Mhm.
time. Where can we find the recorded Zoom? I'm going to drop the link to all of our recordings in the chat. As Rudy, do you know if Mina sends these out specifically to participants?
I think she puts them on the website
On the website.
if I'm
I'm
not
going to
mistaken.
drop the link to the website in the chat. So you should be able to find all of our recordings at
Mhm.
this link. that I'm going to drop in the chat. You're the man,
Thank you.
Rudy. We know he
Thank you
is,
so much.
but it's always good for him to hear it. Okay, it's just going to take me a little, it'll just take me a minute to get to this video site. Hey, I know it's at our Amity and You site.
Mhm.
Amity and You. So first, I'm just going to drop the link for the general Amity and You site. There are a bunch of resources on this that are great, that are important for grantees and others. There's a lot of information here for people who weren't successful with their applications or people who are just interested in general capacity building. All right, video gallery. And here is the link to all of the recorded webinars. And we'll just stay here for a while for people to copy those links. Oh,
Mhm.
I kind of hate smart links. I sort of wonder if there's a way to, I feel like it's more helpful to see the whole address.
Address, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see if this works. tfdn.org/videos. If I do that, there we go. So
There it
there's,
goes. Mhm.
so you've got to put HTTPS // You got to lead with HTTPS // So the whole email address is HTTPS:// www.amityfdn.org/videos. That is where completed videos are dropped.
Yeah, because I can't share my screen. So
Exactly. You're right.
mhm.